Hello, my wonderful, beautiful friends. Welcome back to our I Do Work Here Lady series, where you'll hear stories about people who mistake employees for regular folks. In this episode, we have 9 stories. The first story is about an employee who gets fired for mistreating the owner. The second story involves an employee getting yelled at by a customer. The third features a Karen who slaps an employee in the face for stealing. And the fourth is a boss who doesn't recognize his own employee. Guys, I'm laughing because these situations are so ridiculous. Sit back, relax, and let's dive in. Oh, and hit that subscribe button for more stories in the future. For some backstory, I own a portfolio of 5 different businesses that have very little in common with each other. They're all service-based, and 3 of them are public-facing, located in different areas of the state where I live. Since the businesses operate under separate names, provide distinct services, and are located in different offices and buildings, I tend to allow managers at each location to hire clerical staff without me meeting them first. This largely works out to everyone's benefit, as I don't have to drive several hours to approve a new receptionist, and it saves time for my staff and the new hire. One of my businesses is involved with medical testing and is the farthest from my home, about 3 hours away, so I only make trips out there when necessary. Shortly before COVID hit, I drove to the medical testing office to pick up some papers and to meet the new receptionist who had been hired a few days prior. I pulled up to the office around 5:45 in the evening and walked up to the check-in counter where the new receptionist was sitting. Before I could say anything, let alone introduce myself, the new receptionist said, "We're about to close, so you need to come back later." I thought she was joking, so I chuckled and waited for her to laugh too. Instead, she said, "Are you out of it or something?" I said, "We're closed." While I try to keep in mind that I don't know what's going on in someone's life to cause them to be in a bad mood, I also don't want any of my staff speaking to anyone in that manner. Here's the conversation that followed between the new receptionist and me. I said, "Do you speak to customers that way?" She replied, "Yeah, when people come in late acting like they own the place." I responded, "I do." She scoffed and said, "You do what?" I told her, "I own this place." Then I showed her a badge that states I'm the owner. I said, "I'd like to see you in my office right now." Her eyes widened as she watched me swipe my badge, unlocking the door that leads from the lobby to the staff area. I passed the manager's office and told her to follow me to my office, which she did. The manager, the new receptionist, and I sat in my office and I explained the situation to the manager. I then told the new receptionist that our office serves people from all walks of life and in all types of situations, and I don't tolerate any of my staff speaking to people in such a manner when representing my business. I asked the manager to prepare termination papers while I had the final check made out to the new receptionist. When we settled all the formalities of firing her, I handed her the check, which she grabbed out of my hand and tried to storm out of the building. However, by the time we finished, it was past 6 in the evening, when the office closes and the front door automatically locks, requiring an employee badge to unlock. When the new receptionist tried to open the door, it was locked, and when she tried to swipe her badge, the little red light just blinked because her badge was no longer active. The manager ended up using her badge to let the receptionist out, to which the receptionist mumbled, "Thanks," and left. Yikes! Imagine getting hired and fired in just a couple of days because of something ridiculous you said. Guys, bad day or not, if you're in a professional environment like a medical testing office, it might be best to never say something like, "Are you out of it or something?" to anyone. That's just my take. Next story. This happened to me in March of this year, just as the lockdown started, and many stores had begun offering special shopping hours for elderly and high-risk customers. I worked at a grocery store on the overnight stock crew, and my shift ended at the same time the special hours started. I would frequently pick up items I needed at the end of my shift before heading home. On this particular morning, we had finally received a shipment of toilet paper and cleaning wipes. I picked up a pack of 12 rolls of the cheapest toilet paper in the store and a canister of Clorox wipes for my mom, who's high risk. I wasn't wearing my black work polo because I was 7 months pregnant, and it didn't fit, so I was allowed to wear a plain black t-shirt instead. I grabbed a few food items and headed for the register. I ended up in line behind an older woman. She said very pointedly to the cashier, who's a friend of mine, that we needed to be stricter about the elderly and high-risk guidelines. She looked straight at me as she said it. She continued, saying we needed a guard at the doors to ensure no one was coming in during the special hours except those who actually needed to shop at those times. She also said that if the store let other people in to shop, they should make sure those people didn't buy essentials that others needed. Staring at the toilet paper and Clorox wipes in my hands, my CO worker, an elderly woman who's not shy, looked straight at the woman and said, There's a limit on essential items. You can't buy 2 packs of toilet paper. The customer had 2 of the biggest packs of toilet paper we sold, 18 rolls each. The woman snapped, "Fine, whatever, but I'm not coming in here if you're going to keep letting other people in during special hours. I want to speak to a manager." My CO worker called the manager on duty, who happened to be my manager from the overnight crew. He came up, and this woman went off, yelling about how we let regular people shop during the special hours, how the cashier was rude, and how she was being limited. She went full Karen. My manager looked at me and could see I was irritated. He turned to the customer and said, "I would like for you to leave." She got angry and asked why she should be the one to leave when she was clearly following the rules of the shopping hours, and I was not. He responded, and I'll never forget this for the rest of my life, "This customer you're harassing is my best employee. She just finished working a 9-hour shift to fill these shelves so you could come in and buy your essentials. She's picking up a few items after her shift, and on top of that, you're harassing a pregnant woman who's considered high risk. She has as much of a right to shop here during these hours as you do. She's exhausted and scared because of the pandemic, but she comes in every night, works extra hours, and works her tail off so people like you can come in and talk down to her. You can leave now, and you're welcome to stay out." He walked away. The woman tried to stammer an apology to me, asking about my baby, when I was due, and what I was having. But then the loss prevention guy showed up to escort her out. I checked out my items and was on my way, while loss prevention took a picture of her and noted that she was banned from the store for 30 days for harassing an employee. Mic drop. After my manager tore into that Karen, she felt so bad that she actually apologized to me and started asking about my baby. Oh my goodness, what a moment. Next story. This just happened as I was leaving work tonight. For some background, I work in the copy center at a local branch of a major national office supply retail chain. I don't have a car and usually either walk the mile home or try to get a ride with a CO worker, as most pass by my place on their way home. I always ask and never assume. My store manager is currently in the process of moving, and tonight we were leaving at the same time. I asked him for a ride home, and he said it was fine but asked me to help him load some empty boxes we had saved into his pickup to help with his move. So, 6 in the evening rolled around. I clocked out, put away my radio, put on my coat, and grabbed a cart to head to the office and start loading the boxes into it. Enter the self-important Karen. She said, "What are you doing?" I told her, "I'm helping my CO worker with these boxes." Mind you, my coat was open, and my uniform shirt and name tag were still visible. She said, "That's stealing. You shouldn't be stealing boxes from another company." I just scoffed, said, "Whatever," and started wheeling the cart to the front. Karen followed me, and as I got to the door, the general manager and the closing manager were walking up from the other side of the store, talking about the general manager's upcoming move. I looked at the closing cashier and cheerfully said, "See you Monday, Jay." Then I started heading out the door. Karen grabbed me and started screeching about me stealing from the store. I immediately looked at her and snarled, "You have 5 seconds to get your hands off me before I call the police." Then she slapped me. Unbeknownst to everyone except the CO worker closing my department, the town's chief of police was in the store to pick up his Christmas cards that he'd ordered. When he heard her screeching, he turned to see the commotion and saw the slap. So did the general manager, the other manager, the cashier, 3 other customers, and the store's security cameras. 10 minutes later, Karen was sitting on the curb at the front of the store, screaming like a banshee with a new pair of shiny bracelets. There were 2 police cars and a state police cruiser with their lights flashing in the parking lot, and the heroin the chief found in her purse was on the hood of his car. I was giving the chief my info, and the general manager told him to take my statement tomorrow when I was back on the clock. This is one time where Karen really needed to control herself. Committing assault and accusing someone of theft while in possession of a Schedule 1 drug? Congratulations, Karen, you played yourself. Next story. This is my mother-in-law's story, not mine, but it's very much I do work here, lady worthy. My mother-in-law is a short, curvy woman in her 50s who works in security. Yes, she looks like a sweet older lady, but she's tough, thorough, and will threaten to place you under arrest if needed. Her lead supervisor is older, not the sharpest, and often gets in his own way, despite a high turnover rate due to less than stellar management skills. This has been her first job in 26 years after raising her son as a stay-at-home wife in extreme poverty. As this was told to me, it's not word for word but a rough summary of what happened. Jane, my mother-in-law, was wearing a yellow and red flower dress while running errands and had to stop by the security home office to take care of something. She wasn't sure what, but she figured she was out and thought it best to get it done. She went in and found Bob, one of the primary supervisors who manages most operations. He greeted Jane, and they moved further into the office. Then Brian, another supervisor, came up, saw Bob, and then saw Jane. Brian said, Ma'am, you can't be in here, this office is closed. Bob spoke up and said, no, it's all right, she's with me. Brian's eyebrows wiggled and he said, oh, she's with you, huh? Everyone was confused. My mother-in-law and Bob laughed. It was clear that Brian had never been all too observant. Despite working in security, despite talking face-to-face with Jane numerous times in her year with the company, Brian didn't recognize his own employee outside of her uniform. Evidently, in this encounter, Jane was in a clever disguise, taking on the identity of a strange woman wandering into a security office and casually conversing with his co-supervisor. Bob said, Brian, this is Jane. It finally clicked and Brian said, oh, hey. This reminds me of a time when I was working with a guy who had a really long beard and really long hair. We weren't close as KO workers, we just saw each other occasionally and talked about sports or random nonsense. One day, I came back from vacation, and while I was gone, he decided to shave his beard and get a haircut. Guys, he was a completely different person. He approached me and started asking about my vacation and how my wife was doing, and I thought he was some random guy who somehow knew my life story. It was the weirdest thing. It didn't click that his voice was familiar, and I thought, there's no way it could be him, this guy's so clean-cut, so yeah, I guess I pulled a Brian. Next story. So, I work at a video game store. A few years ago, I was in the store where I work, but I wasn't scheduled, so I was just in a plain t-shirt and shorts instead of my work clothes, just killing some time with a CO worker. While I was there, he got a call from his mom saying there was an emergency. He asked if I could cover for him, and since I didn't have plans, I agreed. Even though I wasn't in work clothes, it wasn't really a big deal. A couple of hours in, a woman walks in and I greet her. She ignores me, so I ignore her back and do some busy work until she's ready. A few minutes go by and she says out loud, isn't there anybody who works here? Mind you, I'm the only one in the store besides her. I said, yeah, I work here, ma'am. How can I help you? Now, I say that from behind the counter. She eyes me up and down, doesn't believe me, and shouts in the direction of the back room, assuming there's a worker back there. I said, ma'am, I work here. I'm the assistant manager. How can I help you? She looks at me again and says, you're not dressed for work. Well, she's not wrong, but I am wearing the name tag that has my title, and I've been behind the counter, accessing the computers, and answering the phone all while she's there. I told her, ma'am, I really do work here. I know I'm not dressed in a store shirt, but my CO worker had an emergency, and he had to leave. I'm covering because I just happened to be here when he got the call. For some reason, she still does not believe me, and decides to pull out her phone and actually call the store. I then pick up the phone and answer it, saying, thank you for calling Game Store, assistant manager speaking. She hung up quickly and said, stop lying. I know you don't work here. I said, ma'am, I don't know what else to tell you. She then threatened to call the cops on me for illegally accessing a company's computer and phone line, and then she ran out of the store in a huff. I didn't get any visit from the cops, and she probably didn't even call them. Believe it or not, I did see her again a couple of weeks later when I was scheduled, and she actually mentioned that there was a guy who illegally accessed your computers. I just said, oh yeah, we got that taken care of. No need to worry about him anymore. I honestly couldn't believe that she didn't recognize me, but apparently, clothes do make a world of difference to some people, friends. That story was so ridiculous that I actually had trouble narrating it. What the heck was she trying to accomplish by calling the store? If the only other person in the store is yourself and another person, and you make the call to the store, who do you think is going to pick up? Sometimes it's really hard for me to read such ridiculous stories. Now you see why, okay? Next story. To start with, I'm a freelance hiking and snowmobile guide on the island of Svalbard, which is in the Norwegian Arctic, and I have to deal with all sorts of people on a day-to-day basis. A few months ago, I was guiding a trip by myself. We only send one guide out when the group is small. So I went to the hotels to pick up my guests, an Italian couple and a Saudi Arabian father and son combo. I walked into their hotel, introduced myself, and got everybody to sit in the car. The dad opened the passenger seat door, sat down, and then looked at me, confused. He then said, "Oh, I'm sorry, this is your seat, right? I can move to the back." I told him, "No, you can sit there if you want. It's much easier to drive from the other side anyway." I always try to crack a joke or two to break the ice, as lots of people are nervous when driving a snowmobile for the first time. He looked at me slightly more confused, but I assumed it was just a language thing. I brought them back to headquarters, gave them a full safety briefing, and provided an overview on a map of where we're going. After that, I got them dressed and told them to wait outside because our suits are made to keep you warm at -30 degrees, so inside a building you quickly start to melt. Once I was dressed, I went to meet them outside. The dad says, "Oh, you're coming with us on the tour?" I told him I sure hope so. It can't go on without me. I'm your guide. Now, I want to note that I had told them in the briefing that my name's Kat, and I'll be your guide for today. The dad then says, "Is that a gun?" I told him, "Yes, sir, but don't worry, she's not yet loaded." The dad and son looked at each other, confused, and we started to walk toward the snowmobiles so I could give them a small briefing on how to drive them. The Italians told me they'd been driving before, so I decided to place them at the end of the group, and the dad and son were in the front because, from experience, it's always better for the more experienced guests to be in the back, since they might have to speed up here and there to fill a gap. The dad then asked me, "But where's the guide?" I told him, "Right here. I'm just in front of you. It's pretty hard to miss. I'm trying to keep cheery and keep the humor going despite knowing where this is going." Then the dad says it. He says, "But you're female. Guides can't be female." I told him about 50% of our guides are women here, and it's not that uncommon. Don't worry though, girl or guy, we undergo the exact same training, and trust me, you're in good hands. The son then chimes in and says, "I think my father wants to know who's going to operate the gun." I told him, "Well, let's hope we don't even have to take it out of the boot, but if we have to, I'm trained and licensed to shoot." The son then says, "No," and I respond, "No, you are a woman. Women can't shoot guns. It's not safe." At this point, I'm getting pretty annoyed and said, "Excuse me, guys, if you don't want me as your guide, that's fine with me. Go back into headquarters, take the suit off, and tell a receptionist to call you a taxi. If you don't feel safe, that's up to you, but I'm the guide for this trip today, and if you want to head out, you'll have to deal with me." The dad says, "But if we don't go, we want our money back." The son says he'll go if I get a male guide for them. I said, "Look, I clearly do work here, and I'm the only guide available right now. You've signed the agreement accepting that I'm in charge of this tour, and you'll have to listen to what I tell you to do and what not to do." So, long story short, the dad then walks off back to headquarters, and his son and the Italian couple stayed. The trip was great. We saw reindeer, we saw a polar bear in the distance, and in general, we had a great time. After the tour, the son did come back to apologize for his behavior, and called me a good girl guide. My boss heard that and still teases me with it today. Listen, friends, all I can say is that some people are ridiculous and need to grow up. I've never once gone on a tour somewhere and thought, I don't want that person leading this tour. If they're leading a tour, they are trained and qualified to do their job. Now, going through the comments, a lot of people say that it's the culture. I don't want this to turn into some sort of craziness in the comments section below, where people start saying that these people do this and those people do that. Just be kind, my friends. Next story. I used to work at a hospital several years ago in various roles within a department. Most days I was in the outpatient clinic offices as the admin assistant clerk, and other days I was a lab assistant for one of the doctors. I had this job even though I was grossly underqualified when I started because my mom was a practitioner there too. Now, I need to say this office was very relaxed, and with me being young but generally well regarded, they looked past the fact that I dressed like a 90s punk. Seriously, the office let me show up with my face and neck pierced, along with dyed blonde hair, visible tattoos, and a very questionable choice of clothing. Being that I worked in locked research labs as well as ran mail, I had access to the whole campus, and I knew my way around the rat maze better than most. One day, I ran into a couple who were clearly lost and desperately looking for an employee, as I heard them ask a few people if they worked there. I knew exactly where they needed to go, and they weren't even in the right building. As a person who loves to help people, I was willing to walk them to their department since I was sort of going that way anyway. So, I approached them and tried to introduce myself and explain that I'll take them where they need to go. This apparently scared them. Not only would they not listen to me, but they also started to raise their voices, saying that I was harassing them, that I didn't work there, to leave them alone or they'd call security and so on. They started to walk toward a nearby coffee stand to seek help. At this point I say, "Forget it, it's not worth my trouble," and I walk away, but I do hear the barista laughing and saying, "You should probably just follow him because he does work here, and he knows where every department is. I decided to be a bit cheeky about it and ducked down the stairwell, as I was over it. This is a plain example of judging somebody solely on appearance. I mean, yeah, I'm a 90s punk with face piercings, neck piercings, tattoos all over. I can see where this couple is coming from, but you know what? That couple could have handled it way better by just saying, "No thank you, sir, we can find our own way." Whatever happened to that? Next story. I'm not sure this entirely belongs here, and I'm open to comments. I worked as an armed guard for an armored truck service. For those who don't know, we're responsible for picking up money and checks from businesses such as banks, stores, restaurants, and so on. As part of my job handling large amounts of cash, I do carry a sidearm, or handgun for those not into guns, in order to protect myself and the money. I also want to note that where I live you have to have what's called a concealed carry permit to have such a firearm outside of work hours, which I have. So on my way home, I stop at a grocery store to pick up dinner. As I had just gotten off work, I still have my name badge on and my sidearm in its holster on my hip. This is important. Cue the crazy lady. I'm browsing the freezer aisle, and I notice a woman start eyeing me. As I'm browsing, she seems to be following me, lingering quite a distance away. I turn around and see her dart around the corner. I just think, she probably thought I was someone else. I go about my business, spend some time shopping, and proceed to the register line. As I'm waiting to check out, in comes a swarm of about 8 police officers. They come straight up to me, with the crazy lady behind them shouting, "That's him! That's the guy with the gun!" They point their guns at me and order my hands up. I drop what I have and comply. At this point, I have no idea what's going on. They're shouting at me to stay down and not move. They ask me what I'm doing here, and I state that I'm doing some grocery shopping, and that I work for Company Z and have a permit for my weapon. So, long story short, they end up lowering and holstering their guns after the commotion and apologize for the confusion. They said they got a call about a guy walking around the store waving a gun around. I say, "I'm sorry, but since I've been here, my gun has been holstered. It never left the holster." They turn to the lady and ask her if it's true that I never took my gun out of the holster, and she yells that I'm lying, that I can't have a gun in the store anyway. They, of course, go check the security footage and see that I did nothing wrong, and they let me go about my business and apologize again for the misunderstanding. They then turned around and handcuffed the lady who called and told her that she's being arrested for misusing the 911 system and inciting panic. So that lady needs to realize that making wild accusations like that can cost people their lives. Reading this story, I immediately thought of one news article I read a few years back where a man was shopping at a Walmart and grabbed a BB gun. The cops were called, saying that this man was walking around pointing the gun at people's faces. If you guys aren't familiar with the story, the guy ended up losing his life. A terrible and tragic outcome. But, my friends, I don't want to end like that, so the next story hopefully will give you a chuckle and a smile. Next story. I'll start off the story by saying that I've been in some form of customer service for most of the past 45 years. Yep, I'm an old geezer. In all those years I've had more than a few ridiculous customers, including one man who threatened to harm me because his credit card application was turned down. But I've never really had a Karen or a Chad or whatever you call a male Karen until today. I thought that was all about to change. So I'm retired and working part-time for a friend who manages a large discount store, clothing, housewares, home decor, and so on. My job is shoes, that's it. I process the hundreds of shoes that they get daily. I spend my days in the back stockroom. On days when there aren't a lot of shoes, I'll help run out the other stock. On this day of days, I was doing just that. I had a big rolling shelf chock full of impulse buys, those inexpensive items that stores always put up front by the registers. When it happened, there was a long line of people waiting to check out. As I'm rearranging the section to work in new goodies, I hear a guy speaking to me. "Nobody ever speaks to me." He says, "You know, you could jump on that open register. I've been waiting a long time, and I've been watching you do almost nothing. Oh, happy day, joy of joys. Today, I finally get me a Karen, and a boy Karen to boot." I've read hundreds of these stories on Reddit, and I am not the shrinking violet that seems to attract them. I am a jerk. Messing with jerks is my hobby. I smile at him and say, "I can't do that." He asked, "How come?" I told him, "Well, it's actually the same reason that you can't do it. I don't know how. Now I'm ready to go. I've waited my whole life for a Karen or her husband, and today is my day. This is practically my big moment. I'm locked and loaded." This man looks at me for a second, and he's thinking of some smart aleck comeback. "Come on, dude, give me your best shot." He then chuckles and says, "Actually, that's a really good reason." "What?" "But Mr. Karen, you're supposed to be mean. You're supposed to be insane." Now I have to regroup. I point to 3 or 4 young ladies who are cashiering and say, "They only have the nice-looking ones up front. They keep the ugly old guy in the back, but I escaped." He then laughs again and says, "That's a really good policy. As an ugly old dude myself, I'd much rather get checked out by good-looking girls than by an old guy." He gets called up next and says, "Have a great rest of your day." Well, so today's not my day. Darn you, nice old dude. My friends, when I started to read this story and read that the original poster had been waiting his whole life for this, I was sure, absolutely sure, that this was going to be a violent, messy situation where security was going to get called. But nope, it turned out to be a pretty wholesome tale, and I absolutely love it, my friends. These stories are a wild mix of workplace confrontations, customer entitlement, and unexpected wholesomeness. Here's my take on each. The medical testing office incident is a textbook case of a new hire's bad attitude backfiring. I'm stunned the receptionist snapped at the owner, assuming they were a late customer. Her rudeness, "Are you out of it or something?" is unacceptable, especially in a medical setting. I love how the OP calmly revealed their ownership and fired her on the spot. The locked door trapping her with an inactive badge, perfect irony. It's a reminder to treat everyone respectfully. You never know who's in charge. The grocery store Karen's entitlement during special hours is infuriating. Targeting a pregnant employee for buying essentials? Low. I admire the manager's epic takedown, defending his hard-working, high-risk employee and banning the Karen for 30 days. Her stammering apology was too little, too late. This hits home for me, given similar stories of retail workers facing unfair criticism. The copy center slap is shocking, accusing the op of stealing boxes and then assaulting them. Karen played herself, especially with drugs in her purse. I'm thrilled the police chief witnessed it and arrested her. The security footage sealing her fate is pure justice. This aligns with your past tales of quick consequences for bad behavior. Jane's security office mix-up is hilarious. Brian not recognizing her out of uniform shows how context blinds people. I chuckle at his confusion, thinking she was an intruder. It reminds me of your story about a coworker's drastic haircut throwing you off. Appearance matters more than we think. The video game store Karen's refusal to believe the OP was the assistant manager is absurd. Calling the store while they're behind the counter? Priceless. I love how they all played along when she returned, claiming the intruder was handled. It echoes your tales of customers underestimating staff. Kat's snowmobile guide story is maddening. The father and son sexism, questioning her ability to guide or shoot, is outrageous. I respect her firm stance, sending the dad packing. The son's good girl guide apology is patronizing, but I'm glad the trip went well. It's a nod to your stories of proving competence despite doubt. The hospital punk's encounter with the lost couple is frustrating. Their refusal to accept help because of the OP's appearance is shallow. I love the barista's quip validating the OP's role. It's like your tales of being misjudged for looking young or different. The armed guard's grocery store ordeal is terrifying. The lady's false 911 call about a waving gun could have been deadly. I'm relieved the footage cleared the op and led to her arrest for inciting panic. It's a stark reminder of your story about a sheriff's misunderstanding. False accusations can escalate fast. The shoe stalker's wholesome encounter with a Karen who wasn't is refreshing. I was ready for a fight, but his humor and the customer's kindness flipped the script. It's a delightful contrast to your revenge-heavy stories, showing not every confrontation ends badly. And that brings us to another end of our IDOWorkHereLady. Friends, if you enjoyed the stories today, do hit that thumbs up. If you missed the last episode, check it out if you haven't, and I'll see you guys in the next one. I love you.